Okay, listen up. This is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm going to tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. Today, we're stalking the dangerous, moonlit streets of London in Vampyr. Vampyr paints an engrossing image of London, one reminiscent of some of the city's darkest days while exaggerated to 11. It's set during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, the disease tearing through the city, leaving wide swaths quarantined as its population withers. The effects of World War I are still reverberating throughout the city, with veterans returning to the populace and the war even now still on many lips. And worst of all, vampire husks known as Skull and violent militia wage war in the streets. The entire city stands on the brink. In the midst of this maelstrom, you take control of Dr. Reed, one of the world's most renowned surgeons and foremost blood specialists who has, ironically, been vampirized and now has a much more personal interest in blood. Following an alarming first night of undeath, you spend the game getting used to your new life while attempting to battle the plague, which just as often requires getting involved in tangled, difficult politics with London's most important, as it does involve actual medical work. Vampyr's main story so far has been excellent and unique. While its Gothic trappings will be familiar, the Spanish influenza epidemic of 1918 in particular is a less explored space, and not just in our medium, but all of fiction. We've seen London brought to the brink of anarchy on numerous occasions. We've even seen it at the hands of a plague before. But this specific moment in history isn't often highlighted, and it makes for a fascinating backdrop to a dark story about vampires that's interested in exploring morality. The way it most notably does that exploration is through its leveling system. Vampyr doesn't have any formalized difficulty options. Instead, you decide your difficulty by how much you're willing to purposely hamstring yourself. See, the main way you get experience is by embracing your inner vampire and getting your chow on. Suck a person dry, and you murder someone in cold blood, but get a level and a cool new toy. Or, you can maintain the moral high ground and not go around murdering people willy-nilly, but the game's NPCs will start to rapidly outlevel you, making combat increasingly challenging as the difficulty outpaces your level. There's also an additional wrinkle when considering whether to nom on someone or not. The game tracks the overall health of each of London's individual districts. The more people you decide to snack on, the more you'll disturb the balance of a district, and if you meddle too much, the entire district will collapse into anarchy and the people there will go missing. The other half of maintaining districts is keeping everyone in them healthy by producing tinctures to cure the sick. Thematically, it's a nice touch, because playing as a doctor, of course you do doctor-y stuff. But mechanically, it's kinda just busy work. Every night the game tells you another half dozen people get sick. You have to go hunt down the materials and hit a button to craft them into a cure, and then you go hand that cure to the afflicted, and you're done. Vampyr reduces aiding the ailing to a glorified fetch quest, and all it really did for me was take time away from pursuing the main storyline. Other side activities were similarly unimpressive for me. Whenever you walk into a district, there's a good hour of sitting down and chatting with all the individual people there to get to know them. Learning more about people makes them worth more experience if you ever decide to eat them, but understandably, a person's not about to tell a random stranger their life story. So for the most part, you just get to talk to people about how London's going to the dogs for the upteenth time. There are a few interesting stories going on, like the romance between two patients, one a soldier with his face burnt off and the other a madwoman convinced she's a vampire. But by and large, Vampyr's side stories hold their most interesting cards very close to the chest. Combat itself is a competent, if perhaps standard affair. Every enemy has 2 bars, one their health, the other a stun bar. Once you've done enough stun damage, the enemy is dazed, and you can take a bite out of them, which gives you blood points, which in turn fuel all of your abilities. Outside of that, it's a standard action RPG with a few different options of weapons and special vampire attacks, mixed in with a healthy amount of dodge rolling, or in this case, teleporting. And with that, let's get to the verdict. 5 hours will be enough to take you through Vampyr's first major arc, but it still feels like there are many to come, not to mention the numerous side quests I still need to get around to doing. I feel like I'm only just getting into the game's second act, and thus it's hard to say that you can get something approaching a complete experience in just 5 hours. The time I've spent with it has been entertaining, however, and while I may talk negatively of some side activities, Vampyr's main storyline is still worth playing through. Just bear in mind that if you dive into this one, you'll have to give up a bit more time than you would for the usual fare on this channel. If there's one thing I'm struck by with Vampyr's gameplay, however, it's how the game is very concerned with the morality of who you snack on in a particular district, but gives neither any consequence or choice to the combat side of its gameplay. If you feast on a key individual or two, you can potentially doom an entire district, which is a serious moral issue where your actions directly cause the death and misery of many. But murder your way through an entire platoon of the vampire hunting Order of Pruin, an organization the game's lore already describes as stretched thin without enough hands to go around, and the world continues on unaffected. Similarly, the game's very explicit about making the act of feeding on London's most important to be optional, making the act an active, moral decision. But combat itself, you rarely have any choice but to participate in, with few to no options to sneak past or reduce the body count as you make your way through London's streets. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation, because if the opposite was true, well, suddenly your moral dilemma of whether to make combat easier or not becomes much less of a dilemma if you can just skip combat. And I feel like that's a microcosm of how Vampyr functions as a game. Just like the district system, Vampyr is mostly composed of a select few very well fleshed out core ideas. And just like the little people outside that system, the faceless NPCs you cut through without consideration or causation, everything else is less considered and primarily serves to elevate those core ideas. Hey, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of First 5. If you did, like, subscribe, or best of all, share this video around wherever you can. Vampyr by Dontnod Entertainment is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. I'll see you all next week.